So Lisa is a object-oriented UX strategist from cohort 1, from the original cohort, the beta cohort. So she, like everybody in cohort 1, really kind of helped solidify and design really what the future of the program was going to be. And she also has a background in education, a really rich background in education. So it was really kind of instrumental in helping figure out how to make the cohort better. She took a lot of notes, sent me all of her notes. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. She's also a mentor, mentoring cohort 3 and now mentoring cohort 4 as well. And it's also helped co-facilitate OOUX workshops with me. So Lisa, I'm going to hand it over to you. Take it away. Tell us all about Notion.
All right. Yeah, I'm so excited. I love OOUX, and I've truly fallen in love with Notion. They're really, really related. So if you love one and like exploring OOUX, I think you're really going to like Notion if you haven't checked it out. All right. So I'm going to screen share here and go over some of what Sophia just said as well. But thanks for that introduction. All right. You guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so welcome to OOUXing your project management with Notion. So I'm Lisa. I'm a UX designer. I have a background in math and science education. I was a math and science teacher for about 7 years. And then I started designing curriculum. And when I was designing curriculum is really when I fell in love with UX and really started to understand how object-oriented UX could help really create a really cohesive product where you're not having to go back and constantly redesign things later on. So now I'm an OOUX strategist and mentor and a Notion enthusiast, I guess you could say. And it's really my love of OOUX that made me fall in love with Notion. Okay, so we're talking about these two big things today, OOUX and Notion. So just quickly talking at a really high level about what they are. So OOUX is a lot of things, but for this talk, really, it's a framework for mapping out a system and laying a solid foundation before designing and developing. So we're just kind of laying a foundation, thinking about the structure. And Notion is software where you can use database tables to build the system. So really, in a really straightforward way, OOUX, we're going to map out the system. Notion, we can build it. So with OOUX, we're making things like an object map and thinking about what are all of the attributes of those? What are the main things in the system and what are the attributes about them? We're also going to create system models thinking about the relationship between things. And today we're going to take this information and put it into tables in Notion. So if you're familiar with databases, this is going to seem pretty familiar. But information in tables is really not that useful. So we want to pull out that information and put all that information into a dashboard that makes all that information much more user-friendly. So that's what we're going to explore today. All right, so first we're going to talk about Notion basics, just to provide some context with Notion. Then we'll build a project management system using OOUX and transfer it over to Notion. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of Notion's advanced capabilities, like things you can do with roll-ups, and formulas, which deals a lot with inheritance. So it's a lot of fun. You can do a lot of complex things in here.
Hi, ma'am.
Oh, are you excited? Oh, okay. All right. So Notion is a productivity software that's part of the no-code movement. It's familiar or similar to some of these other softwares if you're familiar with them. And essentially, you can build databases in UI without coding. And Notion says they're all in one workspace. So if you want a task list, a product roadmap, design repository, you can do all of that in one place. And that's really what I found. I can do so much in Notion and not be using all these different applications. You can customize your own workspace using what Notion calls blocks. And you can solve problems your own way. You really are bounded only by your imagination. So you can do so much with Notion that it's so open-ended. It can be challenging in a way. It's awesome that you can build any system really, but it also can be a challenge. And that's where OOUX really pairs well because it helps us lay everything out before trying to design the system or develop it. Okay, so to provide some context here, let's talk about how we can organize information or the same information in different ways. So through the lens of recipes. So in Notion, we could organize recipes with pages and subpages, one table, all the information in one table, or related tables. And this is kind of my progression of how I learned Notion. I started out just using pages and subpages, then went to one table, then related. So I'm going to slide over to Notion and show you some of this. So this is actually a Notion page I made that I'll share with you. So all the information in here, link to the presentation and all these pages I'm about to use, and some resources you'll have access to later. All right, so organizing recipes. So pages and subpages. So here we have a page with breakfast, lunch, dinner, desserts, and snacks. So if I click on dinner, I'm taken to yet another page, a subpage, where I can see a list of all my recipes, and then I can click a recipe, and I can go to another page where I see more information. So you can do this infinitely. So this is pretty cool that you can do this with Notion, just infinitely pages within pages. The navigation's on the left here, and so it's really easy just to navigate as well. So I'm going to go back a few. So what really helped me was instead of putting all of these pages and subpages, just taking all of that information and putting it into one table. So here we've got all of the recipes just in a table, like think an Excel spreadsheet table. And if I click any of these, it's still a page, which is pretty cool. So I can come in here and still see my recipes, see the detail information. But I have some other things I can add, like tags, breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, or snack. Energy level, like how much energy does it required to make this recipe. So organizing the information this way is really helpful. You can actually click here and you can sort and filter the information, and you also can search. But where this gets really fun is you can actually make different views of the information. So if I click here, I can add a view, and these are the different views we can add. A table, this is a Kanban view, timeline, calendar, list, and gallery. So I've made a few here, the pre-made ones that I made. So let's say we want to see the information by time of day. So I can organize it by breakfast, lunch, dinner, and so on. And I can click on these still and still see the detail. Let me go back here. I also can, let's say we want a gallery view. I just want to browse all of my recipes. I can see all my recipes here. I can also pre-make stuff where I can filter out where I just want to see desserts. So here's just my desserts. And finally, some metadata we had was how much energy was required. So we can group by that in here. See, here's, what are the things that are really easy to make? Maybe I'm just wanting to see that. So this in and of itself is a really fun way to use Notion. This helped me a lot, just putting things in one table. Can we go back a few here? Okay, let's just talk about related tables. So this is what we're going to talk about more today. So let's say we have 3 objects: recipes, ingredients, and weekly meal plan. So with recipes, if I click here, we'll see all the same information as earlier, but I have a relationship here to ingredients. So I can see avocado toast has these ingredients. And if I go back and go to the ingredient object, I can see all of my ingredients and I can see the recipe. There's an automatic relationship that's put in with the relationship to the recipe. So it's pretty cool. You can start building out the relationships in here. And I'll show you for a weekly meal plan. Let's say I'm wanting just to plan my week out. I can come in and there's a relationship here with recipes. So I've got day of the week and this relationship to recipes. So if I click in here, I can see all of my recipes. Let's say I want to do this meal on Tuesday. I can set this up to where it automatically brings in all of the ingredients. So this is such a cool way to start using Notion, just as related databases. Hopefully you're seeing some of the parallels with OOUX with this. When I noticed you could do this is when I was like, you just got really excited. Okay, I'll go back over here to the presentation. All right. Oh, I also want to show you what you can do with Notion just really quick here. So back to our main page. What can you do with Notion? So essentially, just to provide some context, if you hit this / button, you can add all of these blocks. So I went ahead and added some blocks to a page to show you. So in Notion, you can add headings on a page. This is just a page. I'm adding a heading, text, bullet items, checklist items, toggles. You can have a table, as you saw earlier, tasks. And so we can actually move the due date for tasks around on a calendar. You can embed videos and watch them right in here. I think this is so cool. You can embed Figma files right in here, all sorts of files, like whimsical as well, this kind of stuff you can embed right in here without leaving. And you also can place code snippets. So there's a lot you can do. There's even more than just this. Okay, so just again, what we're going to focus on now, we're going to create an object map for a project management system. We're going to translate the object map to Notion, and then create a dashboard to represent the information in the tables in a user-friendly way. All right, so let's think of some project management objects. Like, what are the main things in the system, in the real world, that we're going to think about with project management? So we've got projects, companies, people, tasks, resources, meetings, invoices, deliverables, documentation. So of course there's more objects, and some of them can be combined, like meetings and documentation are kind of similar. But today we're just going to focus on projects, people, and tasks. Okay, so let's just define these really quick so we're all on the same page. Projects for this system, we're just going to say that they're initiatives completed through a series of tasks. And tasks are just individual steps towards completing a project. And people are just anybody who's involved with the project. All right, so let's build out an object map. So you can see down here a key, the objects are going to be in blue, the content in yellow, and the metadata, what we can sort and filter by, in pink. So let's just think through with a project, what information, what attributes would we want to see? So we want to have a name. For each project's going to need a name. So that's going to need to be a text field. And an example, an instance of a project might be like a gym redesign. That might be the project name. A project might need a description. That's also going to be text. And for example, it could be redesign, redesign the gym site to highlight multiple locations. A project's also going to need a time frame. So that's going to be a date field. We'll need a start and end date. And then a status. So each project, so again, this is things we can sort and filter by in pink. So in Notion, they call a select property is essentially just a tag. And the values for the status could be planned, active, and complete. All right, so thinking through tasks, tasks are going to have a title, a due date. There's a lot of ways that we can handle statuses in Notion. There's a lot of different ways, but to keep it really simple, one thing we could do is just say a checkbox. Is it complete or incomplete? And then urgency, and that can be a select field. Is it high, medium, or low? And then for a person object, they're kind of a name, an email address. We might want to keep track of their position. Are they with the company, or are they a designer, PM, or developer? And this could be a multi-select to where we could select if they have multiple roles. Okay, so we could add the nested objects right on here, but we're just going to make a quick system model. So we've got our 3 objects here, and let's just think about the relationship of project to everything else in the system. So is there a relationship between a project and a task? Just think, yeah, there's a relationship, right? I mean, a project is going to have multiple tasks. So we're just going to keep this simple for now and just say, yep, there's a relationship. What about with a project and a person? Yep, a project's going to have one to many people. So there's a relationship there. And we also can think about what's the relationship of a project to another project. And if we had companies as an object, maybe we wouldn't need to make a project relate to a project. But in this situation, we might want to say, oh, these 3 projects are related. I want to be able to find the information for all of these related projects real easily in the future. So we're going to put a relationship there. So I'm just going to show the rest of the relationships. And essentially in this system, there's a relationship between everything. Not every system, of course, will be that way, though. Okay, so why should we map out the system before building it? So I'm going to slide back over here and show you. I built out an object map for project management. And you guys, I built this out in Notion, which is meta, right? It's getting a little meta here. It's so fun. I found it at first, I thought Trello, I was still liking Trello more, but I've ended up really liking Notion as I've kind of gotten to know it more. But you can see it gets complicated. And when you start dealing with inheritance and what Notion calls roll-ups, I found it really useful to really lay out the system like this before even designing it in Notion, even though it's pretty simple actually to do once you know kind of how to do it. Also in Notion, you can, let's just say for a project, we're wanting to know this, to put information like with OOUX, Sophia has all this information that you're going to want to put about an attribute, well, we can still put that in here and kind of lay everything out before we start trying to develop it. Okay, I'm going to slide back over. Okay, so let's take our object map and just talk about how we could put just project into Notion. So essentially, if you on a Notion page, if you just hit the slash button, we're going to bring in a table, just like an Excel spreadsheet table. And our object is just going to be the title of the table. So a project is just the title's going here. Our name, the text field, is just going to go as a column in our table. These are instances. So I know when I was first doing OOUX, it's kind of like, what are instances? And having to kind of really understand that. These are essentially just instances of a project. So to get the rest of this information into Notion, if we hit the plus button, we can see all of the different things. So what Notion calls properties, OOUX calls attributes. So these are essentially all of the attributes that we can add to Notion. So we've got a description, that's going to be a text field. So we can add a text field. Time frame is going to be a date. We can add a date field. And status is going to be a select field. So we can add a select, like a tag, or a multi-select. So essentially all that information is just being put in here. So let's go check out. I'm going to show you this completed in Notion. Slide back over. Okay, so here are all of the objects, our 3 objects put into Notion. Here's everything with projects. We've got tasks where we can see if they are complete or incomplete. And actually, I'm going to change this because I forgot to do this earlier. And we can put this, make this a checkbox. So here we can say which ones are complete or incomplete. And we also have the due date and urgency. And I just love that you can add these little emojis too. I think that's pretty fun. But we can come in here and just change the status. And then for people, we have the name, email address, and their position. So it's really that simple to get the objects in here. And I'm actually just going to undo this because I think it might affect something a little later. Okay. So now thinking about our relationships, let's just think about the relationship between a project and a task and think about how can we put this into Notion. So we know that there is a relationship. So if we slide back over, on a project, I'm going to add another column. I'm going to say I want to know which tasks are tied to each project. And instead of being a text field, I want this to be down here at the bottom. I want this to be a relation or a relationship. And so it's going to say, you know, which database are you wanting to pull in here? I'm going to say I want to pull in tasks. I have a few different tasks in here now. Tasks. And so a relationship's been made. And we can see an automatic relationship to projects has been added down here. So if I click in, I can see all of my tasks and I can say, okay, projects, this gym redesign, I need to create the roadmap for that. And I also need to complete the task flow. And then down here, it's automatically going to populate and show that relationship. So this is pretty cool. This is what's got me so excited with Notion, is just being able to really build all this out so easily. Okay. So, let me show you one more thing here. When these tables get really long, it's hard to keep the information organized with all your objects. So one thing I like to do is click the 3 dots, and you can turn all of these into pages. So essentially, it's just a page. So I can click on it and get to the table, but I can have them all organized right here. And I'll show you what this is really helpful when you start getting a lot of objects into the system. So what's helpful is to place all objects on one page for easy access and organization, then create dashboards to make the information user-friendly. So here's what my system looked like not too long ago. You can see all of these are objects. So if I click on any of these, I'm just going to go to the table. And I'm adding some as time goes on and trying to remove things and make things more efficient, but it's been a lot of fun just adding all this. And one thing I wanted to point out that took me kind of a little bit to understand, but with tasks, I have one master task database or one table for all of my tasks. So it doesn't matter if it relates to a personal meeting or a deliverable or something I'm studying or workouts, it all goes to this database. And that really starts to be, that's where Notion really starts to be really powerful. So yeah, just one way to help with organizing that way. But again, information in tables is not going to be that useful. So let's talk about how to pull it out and show it in a more user-friendly way. So let's just think about brainstorming info for a dashboard. What would we want on a project management dashboard? So we might want first just like a to-do checklist for items smaller than tasks, just little things you need to remember. We want quick links to like current Figma file we're working on, something of that nature. I'm also going to want to see all of my projects, my object of projects, and I'm going to want to see all of my tasks that I have to complete. And so again, in Notion, we can view the information in different ways. And I'll show you this in Notion in just a second, so it makes a little more sense. So with projects, we're going to organize projects by status. Excuse me. We're going to organize projects by status, and we might want to see that in a board view. It's like a Kanban view. So we can slide it and say, oh, this one, is complete. We can slide that over and see. Tasks are going to be organized by due date. So that might be good to have a calendar view of that. We might want to see it on a calendar. And also we can organize tasks by urgency. That might also be good to see in a board view. Okay, so let's go see how to put this into Notion now. Go back here, OOUX to Notion. Okay, so here's that information in Notion. So I just essentially made a new page. So I'm away from the objects now, just made a new page. And we've got the to-do list here. You can just add and delete things. I actually just linked to the people database here if I want to access that quickly. I link to a Figma file. And then down here, this is where Notion gets really powerful. Essentially, I've pulled in a linked database from the original object database. I pulled it in here and I'm showing it. So it's kind of being stored in the other one, but I'm pulling it in and showing it here. And what gets really cool with this is that you can show information in different ways for how you need in different contexts. So here I've got my projects organized by my active, ongoing, and complete projects. And I can also view this in a gallery view. And the reason we're only seeing 2 projects is because I've added a filter to show me when the status is not complete. So I'm only wanting to see projects where that are in progress in some way. So I also pulled in the task object, and this is a calendar view, so I can see all of my tasks and we can move these around. I can view this in other ways, like by urgency. So we've got high, medium, and low. I can see all of these. So you can see it, you can do a lot, but you actually have to build this, which is where it can be challenging to learn Notion a little bit at first, is learning how to do all this. But I found once I understand it, it's just been so fun to play around with all this. And you have to just think about, how do I want to see the information in different contexts? One other thing I wanted to show you here is if you have deliverables or artifacts as an object, you could make a tag for all of the different types of deliverables and actually organize them all in Notion. So this project roadmap for the gym redesign, if I click on here, I actually can build the project roadmap in Notion. So I could actually have the deliverable in here. Or for this project, let's say I didn't want to build it in Notion. I can add an attribute where it's a file, or I could paste a link down here or embed something. So, and I think it's pretty cool. I think in my system, I've been able to start bringing information in, and I can see, what are all of my system models? So I'm like, oh, I know I did a system model for this. I can go look at all of those so easily. And you also can maybe organize these by status, which ones are planned, active, ongoing, or complete. So I just want to show you really quickly how I pulled these related databases in. This took me a little bit of time to understand how to do this. So I have a blank page. Let's just pretend I'm making that page we just saw. So we have let's say we have a to-do list. I'm just typing text now, and you can add a checklist. You can just write and add text. But then how did I bring in actually that projects object to get in here? So I hit the slash, and you can bring in a linked database. So if we bring in a linked database, it's going to say, okay, which one do you want to bring in? I'm wanting to bring in projects. And it brings the project object in. And what's so cool about this is that if I delete project 3, it's going to delete it everywhere. But I can sort and filter and view and change these around. And it's only going to change that right here. So if I add a view, I can add a board view. I'm going to hide this guy. And so I can change the information I maybe see on these cards. I can change the information where I'm like, I only want to see the time frame. And if I do this and I'm hiding the rest of them, it's only going to do that right here. It's not going to do that anywhere else in the system. So it just becomes pretty powerful with how you can view information in different ways in different places. Okay. All right, hopefully that's making sense there. Okay, last thing I wanted to show you is some of the more advanced stuff you can do in Notion with roll-ups and formulas. So we have, let's just say we have project and object as tasks, or as projects and tasks as objects again. And there's a relationship between them here. We can see projects are tied to these tasks, and these tasks are tied to specific projects. Well, another thing we can like include and think about are with tasks are how much time it takes to complete the tasks. So we've got that here. But let's say we're wanting to think about how can we see the total amount of time we spend on the project. So I'm wanting to pull this information up here so I can see how much time am I spending on each of these projects. So essentially we can use something called a roll-up, and this gets into some of the stuff that Sophia teaches with inheritance. So we can, that essentially we're going to make the project inherit the time from the task. So essentially we're just pulling all of these values up and putting them here. And this is using something called a roll-up. And but information listed this way, just with the values, might not be that useful. So we can do simple calculations with roll-ups. So I could say, I want to find the sum of all these. And so, okay, we have the sum. But we can take this another step, because finding the sum really might not be, this is not going to really be that useful as well. So we can also use formulas. So I can take this column, this attribute, and you can use a formula and to show this in hours and minutes. So there's all sorts of stuff here you can do with roll-ups and formulas. All right, so just wrapping this up, diving into Notion will help you explore OUX concepts and build mastery. It's a lot of things that I was confused about have really clicked since playing around in Notion and just seeing all this in action. And just a few tips for getting started. Especially if you're new to Notion or you're just looking for where to start playing around. Using one table is really helpful. And here are some ideas for things you could start putting into one table. You could recreate what we covered today. I have a link to that Notion page I made. Just start creating a simple system. I'd start with 3 objects. And I actually found that like projects, tasks, and people, things like companies, stuff like that was actually easier to build than tried to start with exercise stuff and food things. And it actually is a little more complicated. So I found that was just starting with some of the stuff we did today and including companies is a super easy place to start. So another good thing I think to do is to check out Notion templates and practice by recreating them. And just checking out the templates, you really can start to see what you can do with Notion. And then also you can duplicate and use my OOUX Notion templates. So let me hop over and show these to you really quick. So on this page, I shared my object map I made, the project management object map, but I also have these templates. If you want to play around with actually trying to make an object map, object guide or CTA matrix in Notion, here are these templates. This page, you should see a little duplicate thing up here that you can just duplicate this. But essentially, you can place your objects here and then either click this arrow to add any of these content, chunk, metadata, nested object, etc. Or you can click in here and just say we're wanting to add this attribute. And you can just come in here and then say, okay, I want this to be metadata. It's going to automatically populate this and then populate some of the values. This is one thing with Notion. It can be kind of slow sometimes, but actually then it will populate some of this information for you. So if you're wanting to play around with it, that'd be good to try out too. Okay, so yeah, here, I'll share this with you actually right now. I'm gonna get this link and I'll paste this in the chat. I'll paste it in the chat in just a second. And that's it, guys.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So everybody, this is something that I just learned in the Ladies at OOUX workshop this weekend. So put your applause in the chat. Just put a bunch of gibberish in the chat. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. awesome. Yes, that was so cool. So, Lisa, if you want to dip out, go ahead and dip out. I'm going to see if there's, I'm going to gather some questions. I already got some in a Google Doc that I'll send you, but you are welcome to go unless you want to stay.
I'm okay to stay for a little bit. I'm feeling okay now. Yeah.
You got that adrenaline pumping?
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. So, the question, so Dan had a question. Let me see. I'm trying to get my volunteer. Dan, do you just want to ask your question that you had about your volunteer project? Just go off mute. I could read it. But
Sure.
you can just go off mute.
Sure. And it's not really necessarily, there's nothing really special. The fact it's a volunteer project just happens to be my volunteer project. So it's people who aren't already dedicated to working on, a lot of people who dip in, dip out, not necessarily people who are a team that's organizing around tools. So tried to move away from Google Docs, which I saw other people in the chat mention that Notion would be anything to kill Google Drive and Docs, I'm for. But what was confusing people, I tried to build off a template I saw, and I admit that the how-to videos of the templates made me just feel stupid, for one thing. So that might already be like a doomed to failure step. But I was trying to organize projects and resources and brainstorming documents around a table, around a project, around a sub-project, but then the issue of pages, subpages, and resources came up. And the template we were using, that individual things like brainstorming or collaborative documents were resources. And when people started using it on their own, they just made pages. And so all these linkages broke and people got confused and navigation became impossible. So that's been one of my frustrations personally and professionally with Notion, is it's not very clear. It's a blank void and you start throwing things in. Even if you organize it, people start adding things. And unless they know how your secret organizational sauce, it becomes very difficult. Things just go into a void somewhere. So
like governance on it, because it's so flexible.
Yeah, I wasn't going, possibly, like I mentioned, like that horrible freedom of, you can do anything. So everybody does everything. And yes, that phase, exactly.
Yeah, I can see that happening for sure. I think to use it on a team, I think it all have to be communicating a good bit on how, like someone would probably need to really have it set up in a certain way and kind of manage it more. And then be communicating a good bit in training on how, there's a learning curve with Notion. And
is there a way in Notion as far as like, because you didn't speak too much about collaboration and how you bring other people in, like, can you lock certain stuff, or like, what are the roles in Notion, or like permission, like giving people different permission levels?
Yeah. So we talked about a people object today, and I would say that's more about like a CRM. In Notion, if you have another attribute you can add, is actually they have a person in there. So if everybody was on a team, you can really easily assign things to certain people. So using it for a team, there's a lot of capabilities there. And the permissions, they're pretty clear, but I mean, it takes some looking into. But they have pretty good permissions though, of like setting up things to be viewed by some people and not by others. But when you get into this whole using database stuff, it is hard to keep certain things private. Because I think they have to have access to your whole database or whole object in order to see one thing. So I do think it's possible to use on a team, but it would take a good bit of training kind of initially to get everybody on the same page.
Has anybody else, just opening up to the floor, has anybody else used Notion with a team and like figured out kind of what works and what doesn't work as far as getting everybody on board and making sure it doesn't turn into a total mess? I'm also interested to hear if nobody has thoughts on that from Lisa or anybody else that's using Notion. How I'm not seeing how it could kill Google Docs. I'm not seeing that. Like how would it kill Google Docs? Like, is there a commenting feature? And like, can I go into edit? Like, Google Docs suggest mode is pretty amazing if you're collaborating on something. Does it kill that part of Google Docs, or are y'all talking about something else?
You can do comments in there. So you can do a comment on an entire page, or you can actually highlight text and make a comment on that and then tag a person with that.
Okay. But there's no like co-editing, like going into suggest mode or anything that Google Docs has.
I
Like
don't think there's suggest mode. You just have to
Yeah.
highlight something and then make a comment.
That's, I mean, that's kind of an edge. Like I don't use that often. Where we're actually like collaborating on an article or something like that. So I guess you would still need to use Google Docs for that.
I mean, you can collaboratively write a document in Notion. I've done that. You know, people are typing, and it helps if you, for traffic control, it helps if you like give each people individual blocks, so they're not like literally typing over each other. But yeah, I don't think Notion has something like version control, but to be honest, Google Docs revision control has been more of a hindrance than a help. I find people roll back like something I spent 4 hours editing and I had to go back and manually do it because Google's version control just block overwrites everything you've done.
Oh man. Okay. So I have just another quick, does anybody else put it in the chat or just yell it if you have another, because I have one more question, but I want to make sure that y'all get your questions. Anybody else? You can just go off mute. So my question is about like, what about kind of reusable checklists? So I use that. I use templates in Trello a lot. So I have like, I mean, even for this meetup. So for every meetup, I have like a reusable checklist that I just like created a card from a template and it's got multiple checklists on it. It's like the OOUX Happy Hour checklist of all the things I need to do to make this little guy happen. Does Notion have something like that where you can have reusable checklists?
So you can make templates. So if you have a page, this is something that did take me a little bit to figure out, but you can have a page and you can make it any page a template to where it can just repopulate just like that. And there are ways that you can actually, it takes a little bit of understanding, but ways that you can have if you have to do the same 20 tasks for something, like people talk about this a lot with YouTube videos, that they have to do the same tasks. You can actually set that up to where they're going to be, you can set up recurring tasks in Notion on itself. You could also put them on a page and then bring them into the task database pretty easily, but it takes some finagling, but you can make template pages on their own. Anything that you want to be a page, like meetings, if meetings have the same structure, you can make that a template. That's really good to do. That way you can not start from scratch for each page.
Yeah. Cool.
And I'm actually putting the correct page, guys, in the chat right now. That first one I sent was just to one of the sub pages. So that second one is the correct page.
Wonderful. Awesome. Cool. All right. So does anybody have any other questions before we wrap up for tonight?
Is there an API that you can sort of get data out of it for another location?
I think so.
Somebody else was mentioning that chat that yes, it does.
Okay.
That might have been Dan.
I just checked it as a table API. So you can basically build your content management system in this if you want, I think.
And make an app out of it. Oh,
Not slow.
Scary amount of power. Very cool. Amanda, did you have a question?
Yeah. Are there any other, like I use a lot of automations in my system because I need that to like yell at me, like especially for recurring tasks or things like that. Like I like being able to check things off and then later on they pop back up when they're supposed to. But I'm also thinking about other integrations with other softwares, if it's something with Zapier or something else where you can integrate.
I'm not sure actually how much you can integrate with Zapier. I'm not sure. I know you can though set up reminders for tasks or for anything. You can set a property to something to have a reminder where it will remind you, like create a notification essentially. But yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
So it looks like there is an integration, a Zapier integration. Oh wait, no, Notion has not yet built an integration on Zapier. There's like a big logo there. Oh, it says upcoming. Upcoming. I understand what I'm looking at now on Zapier.com. Okay. Yeah. TBD. They gotta get that's actually really surprising. I'm surprised that they have like, I guess, their own API, but nothing through Zapier. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you for being here. Lisa, thank you so much. I hope you go get yourself 12 hours of sleep. I hope you feel so much better
Thanks.
tomorrow, and that you're on the mend.